It's a Friday, obviously. I say that because I literally just shot what I thought was a video. Then noticed the record light wasn't on. So it's one of those days. But a couple weeks ago, I got an email from a guy who says, "Hey, are you Steve Lehto connected somehow to the Copper Country, Keweenaw area? Just curious." And I wrote him back and said, "Yeah, what's going on?" He said, "Well, I think I have something you might be interested in." He goes, "Did your mother ever paint plates?" And it brought back a memory that I hadn't thought about in decades. Decades. My mother passed away a couple years ago. I mentioned that before. And she was in her 90s. But a long, long time ago, when I was a really little kid, as a hobby, she would take plates and decorate them and then sell them through stores and at fairs and stuff, but primarily stores in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It's a hobby of hers, but she sold them and some of the plates are out there. And when I was growing up, I think at one time there were some plates on the walls that had sayings and finish on them and some designs and stuff. And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he goes, "Well, my mother just passed away also. And I found among her things some plates. And on the back is her name. And I thought maybe I could track down somebody who's related to her." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so, long story short, we worked out a deal where the plates are now sitting right in front of me. And it's amazing because seeing these, I remember the designs. And I haven't seen this plate or one like it in probably 55 years. And so this is a little plate. There's a design on it right there, a bunch of words in Finnish. And on the back, she signed it. And she signed it from Hancock, Michigan, which is where my family lived back in about 1959, 60. And so behind the camera, I've got a photograph of the Houghton Hancock Bridge. And behind that bridge is the village of Hancock, and my parents' house is there. And so my mom used to take these plates. She'd put a stencil over it, and she'd draw the design out or the lettering, whatever. And then she'd ink it in with these special inks. And then when it dried, put them in the oven, and the kiln cooks them in the oven to make it permanent, and she'd sell these plates. So they'd have designs and finished sayings on them. So this one here, for instance, says, "Bid your guest be seated. Speak to him politely. Feed your guest with words until the soup is served." Lillian Lehto, Hancock, Michigan. And so my mom would have made this plate and with a stack of others gone into a local store someplace in the Copper Country or maybe over towards Marquette and dropped them off. They'd sell them and she'd make a couple bucks. And so the guy who sent these to me is from the Negaunee area over by Marquette. And he said his mom had these in her stuff. So here's another one. And I do not know the translations on all of these because this is all in Finnish. And I tried translating some of it, but unfortunately, they use a bunch of letters that I don't have on my keyboard. So I couldn't do it. But I know that one of these here is the Finnish word for home. So it's probably a poem about home. And so many of these were just Finnish sayings. I think there might be some Bible verses and things of that nature. Or this one here is a quote from the Kalevala, which is the Finnish myth story that's so famous. So it was kind of interesting how I got these today because I mentioned that I hadn't thought of them in decades. But I got the news last night that Finlandia University in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is closing its doors for good. They announced that yesterday, and the university is over 125 years old. And so for them to close after this length of time is shocking. But of course, Finlandia is in Hancock, where my mom was when she was making these plates. And the reason they were there is that my mom and dad met at Finlandia, where my grandfather was the dean until about 1961 or 62. And so to get the news last night, tragic closing of that school, was disturbing. And then on the bright side, I got this package in the mail today, which was so unexpected because, like I said, I hadn't thought about these plates, hadn't thought about these in decades. I called up my brother. I said, "Rick, do you remember the plates that Mom used to make?" And he goes, yes. Because you remember the sound they made. And what's funny is the second he said it, I knew what he's talking about. There was a special pen that my mom used because each of these is a different color, right? Red, blue, yellow. And then there's the writing in black. So she had different pens, but the pens looked kind of like a cross between a pen like this and a tube of cement or something. And the ink was rather thick. And so you would, when you touched the pen to the plate, it made a very distinctive clicking sound. And then she'd spell the letter out, and then she'd pick it up, and click again. And you just dink, dink, dink. And you knew that, oh, Mom's doing her plates. So the dining room table was this big, big oak table. My mom would clear the whole thing off and put all her plates over here and her designs here, and she'd grab a plate and start doing the work. And she had a little assembly line going. And then she'd get the plates and put them in the oven and cook them for a while to make sure that the ink was good and permanent. And obviously, she did a good job, because here we are 60 years later and it's still there. And I know that she stopped doing the plates, I'm guessing, in the late 60s or so, because she later went to school, got a teaching certificate, and actually got a master's degree also, and she taught in later years. She's a librarian also. But I know that she enjoyed doing this, and it was one of those ways for her to keep something going with the Finnish culture. So the little Finnish sayings and Bible verses and so on the plates were something that if you went into a gift shop in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan back in the day, you might find some plates for sale with little Finnish sayings on them. And you flip it over. It's made by my mother, Hancock, Michigan, probably about 2-3 years before I was born. So she did do them later, but later on they would have not been marked as being from Hancock, because I was not around when the family lived in Hancock. So I talked to Mark, the guy who sent these to me. We worked out a deal. Thank you very much, my friend. But then the funny part is he sent me a note and said, by the way, here's the tracking information, and I threw in a couple things for you along the way. So he also gave me this little cup, which is also from Finland, and you can tell by, number one, it says so, but number two, it has a very Finnish sensibility about it. But number two, he sent me a book called Finn Farm, A Pictorial History, the story of 8 Finnish immigrant families and the location they built in Marquette County, Michigan's Tilden Township, with all kinds of cool old photographs of the old timers, my ancestors, probably on some level. So my grandfather went to where Finlandia University is in Hancock, Michigan, when it was called Suomi College. And he was there in about 1920 or so. And then later on, he was teaching there. And he taught there for a good 40 years. And it was while there that he married his wife, my grandmother. And it was there that his son met my mother. And so it was quite appropriate that getting that news last night about the school closing and then getting these plates in the mail today was like a bit of time travel, a bit of a time warp. So very, very appreciative of that. And the interesting thing is, Mark didn't know I had a channel on YouTube. He just says, hey, I just saw the name, did some research, and then I saw, hey, there's a Steve Lehto guy who writes books and appears to have some connections in the copper country. Maybe he's related. So I haven't shown these to my dad yet. I told my brothers I've got them, but I'll be showing them off at our next family gathering. And then the real question is, do I have to share or can I keep them? We'll see. We'll see. So there you go. That's my story. Have a great weekend. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.